I have here with me some of the landowners who own land along Elm Street and who developed these properties back in the early 2000s. In addition, I have with me Henry Perea, who also represents some of the landowners. And they may also provide some comments this evening. So what properties are we talking about? These are 15 different properties. It's approximately 92.5 acres along Elm Street. The landowners are seeking a change in land use from neighborhood mixed use to light industrial. And that light industrial designation is consistent with the current operations on the site. So really what they're seeking is to bring the land use consistent with the buildings and operations that are already there. No new construction or land uses are contemplated. And for those of you who may not be familiar, the properties have several tenants, many of whom are local businesses, public agencies, but also some national companies. We have GlaxoSmithKline, that's a tenant, as well as New Star Packaging and Logistics, Pods Moving and Storage, DHL Express, Medvantix, Barney Butter, the County of Fresno is a tenant, Mid-Valley Recycling, and Western Power Sports. So I wanted to provide a little bit of a background so everyone has a sense of why we're here and why the landowners are making this request. Back in the early 2000s, one of the City of Fresno Redevelopment Agency's majority priorities was for Elm Avenue. So this was something that the redevelopment agency was really focused on. And it was specifically Elm Avenue corridor blight removal, streetscape, and business attraction. So as part of those efforts, the City of Fresno actively sought to attract clean industries that provided local jobs to the project area. So as a result of these efforts and beckoning the call that the city made, the applicants purchased the properties that we're talking about today. And they developed the properties as clean industrial businesses, providing a home to several local and national employers. The landowners spent tens of millions of dollars redeveloping these properties to help remove the blight. And at the time the properties were developed, the zoning and land use designation was light industrial. So these landowners all came and developed these relatively new buildings in response to calls from the redevelopment agency for development in this area. The landowners obviously take pride in ownership. They pride themselves on well-maintained businesses. They put obviously a lot of money into developing these properties and making them look aesthetically pleasing. They're all relatively new. Many are between 10 and 15 years old. They're well maintained. There's a significant amount of screening and landscaping, and again, used by several local employers. As you can see, there's a lot of landscaping even within the project itself. The buildings are all freshly painted. They obviously conform to the city's guidelines, but also look aesthetically pleasing. They're not an eyesore by any stretch of the imagination. Even the loading areas have landscaping adjacent to some of them. This is a video showing an overhead view of the project. As you can see, these are relatively new buildings. The properties are well maintained. The buildings are all relatively new, and as you can see, there's obviously a lot of tenants in the building who rely upon these these structures for their businesses and their employees. So this is a view going south on Elm Street with 41 in the background. And just so you know, this area right here is not part of the project. This is where the project starts. So these are the warehouses that are currently part of the project. These are all consistent with the light industrial land use designation, but they're not consistent with the current land use designation, which is neighborhood mixed use. And again, as you can see, all these buildings are very new. They're well maintained. The yards are kept very clean. Unfortunately, you can't see as much of the greenery because of the time of year. This was taken just a few days ago, but as you can see in areas like this is Annandale. The property is very well maintained, and there is a lot of landscaping along the perimeter of these properties. So, why are we here? Back in 2017, the city of Fresno performed its Southwest Specific Plan update. And throughout the early development of that plan, it was contemplated that the properties would remain industrial and employment generating. However, shortly before the EIR, the Environmental Impact Report for the Southwest Specific Plan was prepared, the land use was changed to neighborhood mixed use, which is inconsistent with these buildings that were relatively recently built on the site. The landowners were not aware of this change. None of the Elm Avenue landowners or businesses had representation on the Southwest Specific Plan Steering Committee. And the landowners and businesses never ultimately understood that their land use was changing to a land use inconsistent with the current uses on the property. Ultimately, the Southwest Specific Plan was adopted October 26th, 2017. So why is the existing zoning an issue? Most of the businesses located on the properties at issue are not authorized in the neighborhood mixed use zoning district. And although the businesses are characterized as a legal non-conforming use, this does not provide the protections that these businesses need to continue operations. The inconsistent zoning diminishes the ability of the businesses to attract reputable, responsible, and well-capitalized tenants that the community deserves. So obviously, the landowners want to attract national businesses such as GlaxoSmithKline, and that are reputable, that are well-capitalized, and that are going to be responsible tenants. That's what the landowners want, and helping and having a land use designation consistent with the uses helps attract those legitimate, well-capitalized businesses. The inconsistent zoning also makes it nearly impossible to receive conventional financing, including financing for capital improvements for ongoing maintenance and beautification. So this land use and inconsistent zoning could result in an event of default under existing loans, which is highly problematic for these businesses and their health. If a building is unused for even a moderate period of time due to an economic downturn, such as the recent recession that we all experienced, the landowners will actually lose their legal non-conforming status under the city's ordinance, which would result in the businesses no longer being able to operate. And it's far more difficult to sell properties with legal non-conforming status. So it really does present a very real and tangible problem for the tenants on the properties. Now, heavy industrial uses are prohibited. I want to make this absolutely crystal clear. Although the project does not contemplate any new buildings or land uses, we understand there are future concerns about, uses that may be inconsistent with the neighborhood, and we're sympathetic to that. I wanted to allay any concerns that the public may have about that because the city's light industrial zoning district prohibits the types of uses most commonly associated with pollution. So even if the zoning is changed back to light industrial, the landowners would not be able to engage in any of the following land uses. So you can't do a salvage yard, a rendering plant, a biomass facility, mining, asphalt plants, the types of plants that normally use hazardous chemicals. This is not something we would be able to do under any circumstances on the property. So with that, I'd like to open up the public forum. Again, if you're